Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, young people. I see a lot of young faces in the room. Welcome to our panel on 2250, the panel on youth, peace and security. We're very happy to have a very distinguished panel that I will introduce very soon. My name is Noella Richard. I manage UNDP's global program on youth. I'm based in New York, and I'm also a member of the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, which we will also talk about. I will, before introducing the panel, briefly show you this very important study that you should all have a look at, which is called The Missing Piece in English, Les Absents de la Paix en français. It's available on youthforpeace.info, and it is a groundbreaking report, an independent study that was presented at the Security Council in April 2018. And I would say it's groundbreaking for a number of reasons, because it addresses a number of myths and assumptions about the role that young people actually play in peace and security. It was mandated by UN Security Council Resolution 2250, which, it might sound surprising, was the first one to actually recognize the positive contribution of youth. And actually, since I mentioned Resolution 2250, who in the room has heard about it? Quick show of hands. Okay, a good number. And who is a member or represents a youth organizations, movement, or network in the room? Good, very good. Okay, great to have you all, and we will have enough time for Q&As at the end of the session, so feel free to start thinking about what you would like to ask to our beautiful panel here. I will start by introducing Kessy. Kessy is a young peace builder from the Central African Republic. She has founded an organization called URU, and she is also a partner in crime when it comes to the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. We've been working closely on the development of this study as well, since she was a member of the advisory group of experts on youth appointed by the Secretary General. So perhaps, we will start hearing about your role in developing this study that carries the voices of more than 4,000 people, representing the voices of a million of others, young people around the world. And I think it would be interesting to hear about your work as part of the development of this study, but also your field work in Central African Republic. So please go ahead.
Hello. Okay. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. I will speak in French, though. It's easier. I'm in France, so I want to speak in French. Donc, je m'appelle Kessy EKOMO, je suis de la République centrafricaine, et je te remercie, Noella, de me ramener encore, de me donner l'opportunité de pouvoir parler encore de cette étude. Comme Noella l'a souligné, je travaille sur le terrain. J'ai une organisation qui s'appelle URU. URU, dans notre langue nationale en République centrafricaine, ça veut dire décoller. Et décoller, pourquoi ? Parce que la jeunesse centrafricaine, comme dans beaucoup de pays, comme les jeunes de beaucoup d'autres pays, ont toujours été considérés comme ceux qui sont toujours en retard, ceux qui sont toujours un peu à la ramasse, entre guillemets, en termes d'actions concrètes pour transformer les communautés ou pour amener la paix dans le pays. Donc décoller, pour nous, c'est mener des actions concrètes au niveau communautaire, mais aussi réduire le gap qu'il y a entre les actions menées par les jeunes au niveau communautaire, au niveau le lien avec le gouvernement, mais aussi l'image que l'on renvoie au fait de cette jeunesse-là au niveau international. Et donc, le travail qu'on mène, le rapport que Noella a présenté, est vraiment pour nous une expression concrète au fait de tout ce pourquoi on se bat sur le terrain, de tous ces efforts que nous faisons, même qui ne sont pas reconnus par nos autorités au niveau local. Ce n'est pas tant la dimension internationale qui était importante, mais surtout la reconnaissance. Et pour la première fois, et Noella l'a souligné, historiquement, ça vaut ce que ça vaut, croyez-moi. Historiquement, travaillant sur le terrain, être reconnu par une résolution du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies et vivant dans un pays en conflit, oui, ça a du poids. Ça donne de la valeur au travail que nous menons sur le terrain. Et donc pour nous, cette résolution et ce rapport qui met en valeur au fait toutes les critiques, comme je l'ai dit, au fait qu'on émet sur la jeunesse, toutes ces présomptions, les policy panic, comme on dit, de dire que la jeunesse est toujours le problème. Vous êtes au courant de ça, c'est ce qu'on entend souvent, surtout pour les organisations de jeunes dans la salle. On est d'accord ? C'est souvent nous le problème. On ne nous voit pas souvent comme la solution. Et là, ce rapport, en fait, met en valeur tous les efforts que la jeunesse met. On est diverses. Et c'est ça qui nous rend incroyables. Mais ça, le côté incroyable n'est pas reconnu. On est diverses. C'est que la manière dont nous approchons les notions de paix, de sécurité et autres, est beaucoup plus diverse que ce que proposent, dans une certaine mesure, les acteurs au niveau international. Et donc, pour le coup, on devient complémentaires. Et donc, le rapport pousse, au fait, nos autorités à reconnaître cette complémentarité. Nous ne sommes pas que des bénéficiaires. On devient concrètement des partenaires, au fait. Et nous, le travail qu'on fait sur le terrain en République centrafricaine, c'est de pousser petit à petit le gouvernement centrafricain à nous incorporer dans tous les efforts de paix. Là, dernièrement, on a finalement eu accès à la revue du mandat de la mission des Nations Unies en République centrafricaine. Et c'est un succès, croyez-moi. Parce qu'avec ça, en étant présent, en portant notre voix sur la revue de son mandat, on sait que, dans une certaine mesure, ça nous aplanit le terrain aussi pour mener des actions plus concrètes sur la durée. Un autre point que j'aimerais souligner, c'est le travail que j'ai eu à mener au niveau du groupe de travail, du groupe d'experts nommé par le secrétaire général des Nations Unies. Croyez-moi, la République centrafricaine, qui connaît la RCA, la République centrafricaine dans la salle? Une bonne partie ne connaît pas le pays. Et c'était surtout ça, au fait, être reconnu, dire qu'un membre, un jeune de la République centrafricaine peut être reconnu dans une instance, dans ce groupe de travail, le groupe d'experts sur les questions de paix et de sécurité, c'était déjà une victoire pour nous, pour la jeunesse centrafricaine de chez moi, dans un premier temps. Et donc, travailler avec des jeunes venant de différents environnements, différentes zones de conflit, et vraiment des personnes aussi extraordinaires que les membres du Conseil, des membres du Conseil de sécurité, les équipes des agences des Nations Unies sur place, nous a permis vraiment d'avoir le sentiment d'être écoutés. Et au-delà d'être écoutés, on parle souvent de la participation concrète de la jeunesse, c'est de pouvoir vraiment nourrir au fait ce rapport. Ce n'est pas juste un groupe d'experts qui se sont assis, mais ce sont des jeunes aussi qui se sont assis avec ces groupes d'experts pour pouvoir dire concrètement qu'est-ce qu'il y a à faire et comment les choses se passent concrètement sur le terrain. Donc voilà pour moi un peu la manière dont les choses se sont passées. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup, Kessy. I think it's really important to underline something you just mentioned, the key role of civil society and youth organizations in even lobbying and advocating for such a normative framework and such a resolution. So I think that was the perfect alliance between UN, civil society, other stakeholders, the work with member states, but it was really the idea of young people themselves to even, propose such a framework. What we will discuss here in this panel are really connected to the findings and recommendations of the study. We want to hear about examples of work, of concrete work that is being undertaken in the field. We want to plan some ideas for partnerships, get a sense of, the potential for collaboration with youth organizations when it comes to creating national coalitions on youth peace and security, when it comes to changing perhaps the way in which we do peace and security work, challenging a little bit our own existing rules and practices so that we can fund and promote and support youth-led initiatives. This work is directly also related. I think it's important when it comes to the broader peace agenda to note that it's directly related to the Secretary General's approach to prevention. It's directly connected to the Youth 2030 new UN youth strategies that was launched by the Secretary General in September. It's directly connected also to women, peace and security, to the nexus between peace, human rights and development. This is not a siloed agenda we're talking about, but really talking about a transformative way of looking at young people so that we can hopefully make all our efforts on peace more sustainable and more meaningful. I will now move to OECD to give the floor to Miriam Halal, who manages the OECD MENA program. And you've recently undertaken some very interesting work on youth inclusion and participation being a pillar of the 2250 Security Council resolution. We wanted to hear share what your ideas and thoughts were about how to go about meaningful participation of youth. Please.
Thank you, Noella, and I would also like to congratulate the organizers for this fantastic forum and for the opportunity to be a strategic partner of the OECD is a strategic partner of this event. And I will talk about, as Noella was saying, about about youth in the Middle East and North Africa, Mena, and what the OECD is doing to support young people and governments in improving channels for youth engagement. But let me briefly give you a bit of context. I think that's very important when we talk about the MENA region, about the current challenges. As of 2017, 26% of the world displaced people are being hosted by MENA countries, a region that makes only 5% of the total world population. At the same time, you have also that a region is witnessing the largest ever youth cohort in their histories. Some of the countries have 2/3 of the population below 30, among them also Jordan, which has 70% of the population below 30. And I personally think saying youth is the future is an outdated statement in this context. How can youth be the future if 70% of the population is young? The country itself needs to be conceptualized as a young person. Youth is not the future, it is as much, it is the present. With high opportunities, and I can tell you that a lot of OECD countries would wish to have a younger youth cohort. But also, of course, with this comes challenges, and we see in the region the highest youth unemployment rates in the world. And why we do not have average figure for youth not in employment, education, and training, the so-called need factors, I can give you the cost for need in OECD. In OECD, the average of our countries have 15% of young people in need. And this cost the OECD an average between 0.9 and 1.5% of GDP. Also, to give it a bigger number, it's anything between 360 and 600 billion US dollars. What we also see in MENA countries is a much lower level of trust, the trust of young people in government than their parents. So parents have a higher trust rate in the capacities of their governments to achieve their socioeconomic objective than young people. And this is very much reflected also in the lower voter turnout of young people in the region, and also in the lower representation of youth in public life, be it in the public, be it in official positions, or be it in community work. And let's face it, in conflict and post-conflict setting, when trust in government is anyhow badly shaken, engagement, especially with youth, is not an option. It is a strategic necessity. Of course, the question here is how do you bridge this trust gap? And the slogan of the OECD is better policies for better lives. So naturally, we would start at the policy level and think about what we are talking about, which group we are talking about. We are talking about a very diverse group youth that is having different needs of public services throughout their different stages, when they are moving from education to employment, when they are moving from parental custody to full adult rights, etc. So bridging the trust gap, first and foremost, needs, of course, be linked to access to adequate services and access to better channels of youth engagement. And here, a piecemeal approach certainly won't work. Government need to think big. At the policy level, hence the necessity of an integrated youth strategy. If you do not know where you're going, you will certainly end up somewhere else. So a strategy is very important, and we have supported Jordan, Tunisia in the elaboration, and Morocco in the implementation, for instance. But that, of course, is not enough. A piece of paper, as you know, and you have certainly seen it several times. It's the implementation that counts. What does it take to implement? And here, coordination is key. Coordination as horizontal level between the different line ministries, vertical level between the various levels of government, and in particular using the diverse hooks that you have in these countries currently going on, the decentralization process, etc., or the open government agenda. And then, of course, thinking about tools to engage youth, the famous mainstreaming tools. Noella, I don't like the word mainstreaming at all. I think of representation rather than mainstreaming. Representation of youth concerns in policy and programming. And here what we have seen in the MENA countries is the precious infrastructure that is already in place by having youth centers. Just to give you some figures, in Morocco you have over 600 établissements de jeunesse. In Jordan you have 200 youth centers, and in Tunisia over 500. And in addition, of course, more established institutionalized structures such as Youth Council, and we have seen this in Palestine, in the West Bank and in Lebanon. And I think with this, I stop here before you get angry with me because I succeeded the time.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you for raising this very interesting point. I mean, the importance of considering, first of collecting data on the need factor, understanding a bit better what we mean by a mistrust, potentially also between young people and the government. These points are well taken on mainstreaming. I think I will absolutely agree with the fact that what matters at the end of the day is a meaningful, real channels for meaningful participation, and not a mainstreaming that would actually invisibilize young people, and ensure that we have a real interministerial coordination. Here again, we're not only dealing with ministries of youth, we're not having just sectoral approaches, but the idea is to, across the board, have young people at the table and meaningfully contributing to the implementation of initiatives, the monitoring, the accountability mechanisms, etc. I will turn now to Nafisa from the Aga Khan Foundation. You are doing tremendous work on participation, on education, that is very relevant to this conversation on youth, peace and security in Central Asia, in East Africa. Could we hear a little bit from you about the persistent barriers that you see to meaningful youth empowerment, to meaningful youth participation, and perhaps some ideas on good solutions, on good approaches to overcome them? Nafisa, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay. Maybe just briefly about the Aga Khan Foundation. We are part of the Aga Khan Development Network. We are operating in over 20 countries across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. We're a very locally rooted organization, and we have a long-term presence and commitment in the countries where we work. In some countries, we've been present for over 100 years. And really, I think our work is also rooted in values and practices of social cohesion and pluralism. I think in terms of youth and engagement, empowerment engagement, it's becoming, it's always been, I think, a priority areas for us, but it's becoming a very important part of our work. And I think if I put it within the peace and security framework, I think our work really falls under the prevention and prevention measures and around peace building. And I think like in the MENA region, young people are a part of our work because they are, in the countries we work, are representing the larger percentages of the population. Similarly, in for example, in Kenya right now, it's estimated that 75% of the populations are under the age of 30. In Pakistan, where it was just 2 weeks ago, 60% of the populations are under the age of 30. So we simply cannot and shouldn't really ignore young people. And I think before maybe talking about some of the work that we're doing with youth engagement empowerment, I'd like to highlight some of the challenges and barriers that still exist in this context that really prevent young people from this meaningful participation. In coast of Kenya, in Lamu, we have been working and partnering with youth-led civil society organizations and local government. And recently we organized and convened a social innovation hub where we got young men and women, youth-led civil society organization and local government to really look at think through some of the challenges and maybe come up with certain solutions that we could test and see if that's really working. And before looking at the solutions, we really wanted them to think through some of the challenges that they see that really prevents them. And here are some of the challenges that they've highlighted. It's the level of participation. They're really frustrated that they're not participating in the decision-making about their own life, that the government is not necessarily meeting some of their needs around creating jobs, addressing issue of substance abuse, which is becoming more and more challenging in some of the coastal areas. Of course, quality of education from primary all the way to technical and vocational trainings, institutions, and when you compare it to urban versus rural areas have a less quality. Insecurity, they are all concerned that they're being targeted by Al-Shabaab. And at the same time, they're facing challenges and conflict with the security forces and the police. And then, of course, gender equality around lack of opportunity for women. Now, if I take these challenges and look in Central Asia, in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, a country where I originally come from, there are similar challenges. Of course, the context is different. They don't have the threat of Al-Shabaab, but there's a threat of ISIS. The Soviet legacy might have given a bit more access to education. Young people in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan will go finish their high school. Many of them even get their diploma and university degrees, but those diplomas and degrees are irrelevant for today's jobs. And here globally we're talking about let's create jobs of the future. And currently in these places, people with university degrees cannot find current jobs, are not relevant for today's jobs. The only option they have for raising their voices is social media. They feel more comfortable talking about frustration in social media than with their local community or local government. And then across the river, there's Afghanistan and further Pakistan and India. Again, similar challenges, but if you look at young women in those places, the only option young women in rural areas, in northern areas of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and even Patna, urban area in India, in Bihar, their only options outside of domestic course is really primary school. And whether they finish their primary school, many of them are dropouts, that's it. Then they stay at home and waiting for getting, married. And then there's an early marriages, there are early pregnancy, and of course then there's the, children are born stunting, so that whole life cycle approach. So these are some of the critical challenges that still exist and prevent. And I think for Aga Khan Foundation and the network in large, I think initially we really were silos. We were looking at, let's address education sector will look at education, health will look at health. And then we really realized that when we're looking at young people and youth, it has to be a multidimensional approach. We do need to think about health, well-being, nutrition. We need to think about their participation as a civil society. We need to look about education, employable skills. And those are the critical multidimensional aspects that we really need to address. So we can't just focus on one thing. I could maybe... yeah. And I think if we're looking at some of the things that we are addressing, again, if I take the young women, our first step is really parents' engagement. In order for these girls to even leave home, we have to do a lot of work in ensuring that their parents are comfortable with allowing their girls to leave home. So a lot of our time is spent on community engagement, parents' engagement, is really understanding what will allow these girls to leave home. And then creating spaces that are close to home. Once they're close to home, then parents will feel comfortable allowing their girls to go to those spaces. And then once they're in those spaces, there is a mentor, whether female mentor, peer mentor, that is important for those young girls to feel comfortable to share their stories and to see where they are really can really add value. And I think about education, we tend to focus very much on knowledge and skills, and I think we really need to start thinking about pluralism, values and attitudes. Those are critical. These young people are living in a global world. The coexistence with other young people from a different faith, ethnicity is very critical. And then I think the other area that we are constantly thinking through is when we talk about the 21st century skills, there's a lot of talk about financial literacy, entrepreneurship, but we need to think through an ethical framework. Are we really preparing the young kids of today to address issues of today within that ethical framework? Given a lot of corruptions and things that's happening, what are those good models that we really think through? And having that ethical framework is really important for us and for our work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nafisa. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of ethics and of governance reforms when it comes to this issue in particular. I will come back to perhaps the link, since you emphasized the preventive measure in the second round, on the linkages that you see with the prevention of violent extremism and the role that young people can play on that. I will now move to Haifa Dia AL-ATTIA, a member of the Paris Peace Forum Steering Committee, formerly the founding CEO of the Queen Rania Foundation, among others. You also actually were part of the Aga Khan at some point, Aga Khan Academies. Haifa, could you tell us, according to you, what role do you think young people can play in promoting a culture of peace? I think it would nicely link to what we just heard on education, on this importance of values.
I really love the report on this panel because...
The mic.
Oops. I think it's a good thing to be the last speaker on a panel because I think I will amplify and reflect on some of the things that my co-panelists have been talking about. So to start with, let's say, let me talk about the crisis of trust that Miriam alluded to or talked about. There is more than just that crisis of trust. Of course, she also said that we can't talk about youth being the future. They are now the reality of many areas of the world, and they will shape that future. And so if we don't give them the tools, we will have a future that we do not want to look out and see. So that crisis of trust between youth and their governments and the institutions that follow that government, those governments, is also one that is, I think, amplified by a crisis of skills, a crisis of attitudes, and an inability, a despair, a loss of hope. So let me just take sort of a global view of what youth look at today. If I were young, I would probably also be really dismayed at the reality of life. Everything is changing so fast. I don't think technology and science has ever been this fast in moving forward. So you've got AI, you've got robotics, you've got virtual reality, 3D printers. All these things are attacking young people, and they are changing the world in which they will have to not just work, but survive and thrive. Now, if we talk about the jobs that they will look forward to, let me just say that half of jobs will be disappearing very soon. And while they will be replaced by another similar number of millions of jobs I'm talking about, they will be replaced. But the replacement jobs will actually necessitate a new set of skills. So a third of the skills that will be needed in 2020, we're not talking about 2050. 2020 is 2 years from now. 1/3 of the skills that they will need, they don't have. New skills. And 65% of students who walk into their first day of school in 2018, or who walked into their first day of school, will be working in jobs that haven't yet been invented. I thought it was really, really ridiculous that I was looking up an emoji that somebody sent me and I said, what do they mean? And I Googled it, and guess what? There is a job called emoji interpreter in the world. I had no idea that existed, but it does. And guess what? If I'm going to be connected, as I am, to young people, I'm going to need to understand all the emojis, because that's how a lot of people express themselves. Having said that, let me just say that the divide we talk about, the South and the North, is amplified along those lines. The technologies that exist in the Northern Hemisphere aren't exactly replicated in the South. Let me tell you that as the Paris Peace Forum set out to choose out of 850 projects that came to us to look at, and so that we could showcase them here at the forum, we had to struggle to find that kind of balance that was geographically appropriate. We can't leave half the world, if not a larger portion, behind. It just doesn't make sense that all of these projects came, the ones that we would have wanted to select, came mostly from the North, and you can't leave the South behind. So you've got that crisis of South-North not always going in the same direction. They do not have access to the skills that the digital age wants them to have. They also have a crisis of haves versus have-nots. There is poverty in areas that people don't understand. It is a crisis that threatens survival, not thriving, not just doing well in a new age economy. But there is also the issues of gender. Maybe in the Middle East, we probably have one of the outstanding reverse sort of situations where girls do better at school than boys, and they do better at university. So 56% almost of Jordanian graduates are actually women and not men, but then they translate into only 10% of the workforce, which means that although they're doing well at school, as you were saying, their university credentials are irrelevant. They can't do much with them. And unless we give them the tools, first of all, to make a living, they will not be able to make a life. And they will certainly not have the attitudes and the behaviors that come with a balanced life. If you have skills, highly honed digital skills, but you have no attitude, bad behavior, and no ethics, you can become somebody who works for ISIS at the very worst of levels. If you have all the skills in the world and you have no hope, you're going to be brought down also by that. So it's this balance between the skills, the competencies, whether it's we're talking about literacy, numeracy, but beyond that, to other skills that will allow them to live. There are the attitudes and the behaviors that have become the third crisis. And that is what threatens the world today. And I think because so many youth will be in charge so quickly, they must be given those tools that equip them to fight that call for recruitment to darker forces, but also the tools that allow them to thrive on their own.
Good, thank you very much. So perhaps now we'll open the floor. I see we have about 20 minutes. We'll open the floor for Q&As, and then in a last round, you will have the opportunity to reflect on, collaboration moving forward, any final key messages that you may want to share. So is someone helping? Yes, number 2, behind you. And we'll give the floor to a man because, as you see, we have an all-female panel today. Yes.
I'm a co-founder of Youth Climate Leaders. We have a stand here on the Paris Peace Forum. We basically, exactly as I was saying, we help young people to develop right skills through a learning journey so they can become climate leaders. Our focus is about climate change and sustainability field. So what we do, we create a bridge between young people and organizations from all over the world, helping them to start their jobs and their careers as climate leaders through those organizations that we connected worldwide. My question is, what we are feeling, we struggle a bit when we are connecting those young people with organizations worldwide. I can see they don't trust that much. Still, we got applications, like in our first cohort, 500 applications from 95 countries. And we got young people from all over the world saying exactly the same thing. We want to work with climate change. I can see people from Vanuatu, for example. I can see my country drawing, and no one is listening to me. So we're going to just bring all them together, providing the right skills so they can get there in a shorter way. But the organizations, they seem not to be that open yet to receive young people and to put young people in the table to have the same level of discussion. So my question is, do you think it's going to change in the time that we need that to change, that the change about organizations being more open to youth, it's going to be faster or not? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. It will be whoever wants to take this one. We will move to the gentleman over there.
My name is Imrana Alhaji Buba. I'm from the EU Youth Cooperation Hub. And I think my question is to all the panelists, like any of them can answer. Like they both mentioned education, skills, and something. But when we look at radicalization, there are different dimensions. Like in countries like in Africa, in the Sahel, you see young people in villages, maybe because of lack of education, joining extremist groups. But when you go to Europe, with other groups, you see educated people, sometimes engineers, doctors going to join ISIS, joining other left-wing extremists and so many others. So which kind of skills do you talk about? You mentioned about tolerance, pluralism. Do you think it's actually the solution? Is it actually the factors, lack of those skills that fail young people, or there are other dimensions that we need to explore? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take 2 more. Yes, here in the front, number 2, second row.
I'm co-founder of an Interconnectivity youth project, which aims to connect youth worldwide and to create link between them and policymakers. And my question to you would be, how do we create trust in order for people to fund youth? So that would be my question.
I represent 2 NGOs, and first of all, I'd like to thank you so much because I feel so represented with this women's panel, and I got to see that we actually face similar problems all over the world, so gender inequality and etc. So since I'm from Brazil, we are so far one of the biggest democracy, but we don't have so much representation in Congress. So we are looking forward to build an advocacy strategy to reinforce the women in Congress in policy building. So I would like to ask you if you have some tips to engage a woman in politics, since we are so, not well represented all over the world, but especially in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the panel and take a second round of questions afterward. We had a gentleman that wanted to ask a question. Yes. Okay, let's take this one.
Non seulement je partage totalement l'analyse qui a été faite et partagée, mais on arrive exactement aux mêmes conclusions qui sont la suivante. C'est-à-dire que s'il n'y a pas un véritable changement de paradigme extrêmement important, Ben, on ne voit pas, on va tous dans le mur. Bon, au niveau de l'Afrique, notamment de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, ce à quoi on est arrivé, c'est à l'idée que d'une part, il fallait, ce changement de paradigme, ça voulait dire qu'il fallait mettre vraiment la jeunesse au centre de la politique, avec des tas de conséquences, et notamment aller vers elle. Et au niveau des demandes de la jeunesse, qui se terminent effectivement par l'emploi, qui est quand même essentiel, mettre l'emploi au cœur de la politique économique, c'est-à-dire pas forcément la croissance, mais l'emploi. Et je pense que ces deux prises en compte de ce changement radical ont des implications très importantes. Alors pour l'Afrique, en ce qui concerne, la solution, c'est qu'aucun pays ne pourra émerger isolément, ils sont si petits, je reviens à la Centrafrique, donc c'est l'intégration régionale, et c'est la vision à donner à la jeunesse, et elle peut être un acteur. Et donc, par exemple, la semaine dernière, nous avons, au niveau du Conseil économique et social au Sénégal, présenté ces conclusions avec les documents avenants et avec les gens qui ont fait ça, en allant vers elles. Et effectivement, on a senti la possibilité, lorsqu'on leur donne quelque chose de volontariste, mais de réaliste, de créer une véritable adhésion, alors que la semaine d'avant, ils avaient caillassé la voiture du président. Donc il y a un vrai problème de confiance, mais avant tout, il y a un vrai problème qui nous interpelle tous. Et à la limite, je dirais, on parle du Forum de la paix, c'est peut-être même le thème essentiel de demain.
Merci. Excellent. Donc, retournons vers le panel. We had a question on youth climate leaders, but that also has to do with the trust that that organizations, international organizations or institutions, may be or not receptive to youth participation. The question from the AU-EU Coordination Hub on skills and pluralism, is that the solution? This very important comment about going towards youth as well, going to spaces that are owned by young people as well, to address this question of mistrust and the role of women in policy making, in politics. So you may react on one or various questions. Haifa.
I'll take one part. First of all, I think youth are getting better at getting their voice heard. And this is the right time for you to start making yourselves heard. Because there is a real sincere effort on behalf of the people in charge to integrate you into the solutions. So do make your voices heard. We've had movements across the globe, whether in Tahrir Square, in Egypt, regardless of the outcome. It's about making yourselves heard. But I will also answer something else which people asked about the skills. So I set up a massive open online course platform in Jordan that now has around 2 million Arab learners. And those learners are exactly in that category of age that we define as youth, which is around 18 to 29. And the idea is that while we can get some skills and some courses out there that we think they need, we also allow the people, the learners on the platform to come back to us and tell us what they think they need, because they're the ones out there who are struggling, whether to get a job or whether to get funding for their entrepreneurship. They want skills and they can ask for them. And I think really this is a good time. Like it's a good time for women to ask for their rights, it's also a good time for you all to step up and also ask.
Okay, I want to give the floor to Kessy. You wanted to react specifically on skills and space, yeah.
Je voulais juste souligner un point qui revient souvent, c'est la question de la confiance qui est posée. Je pense que cette question de confiance, ça aussi, on a une part de responsabilité en tant que jeunes aussi dans le travail qu'on mène sur le terrain. On se plaint souvent que cette confiance-là ne vient pas du côté, qu'on ne ressent pas cette confiance-là du côté au fait de nos aînés. Mais au fait, il y a aussi un manque de confiance venant de notre côté. Et je pense que c'est avoir ce discours intergénérationnel, cette conversation intergénérationnelle qui peut avoir un impact positif au fait sur la manière dont on se perçoit les uns les autres. Il y a un autre point aussi, c'est au niveau de la confiance. C'est très rapidement, moi, comment je perçois la question de comment construire la confiance ou changer l'image que la perception qu'on a de la jeunesse. Il y a un travail à faire au niveau local, auprès des populations, auprès de nos pairs aussi. C'est valoriser, surtout valoriser. Ça, c'est important. Surtout pour nous qui avons l'occasion de participer à des forums comme ça, généralement, on a tendance à parler beaucoup de nous. Mais je pense qu'il est important de valoriser de plus en plus nos autres pairs sur le terrain qui mènent des actions et qui sont à même de pouvoir refléter. Parce que si on a juste un exemple, un modèle, ça ne suffit pas. Il nous faut plusieurs modèles pour servir de levier. Et il nous faut avoir plus d'espace au niveau international. Et cet espace-là ne marchera que si on a des coalitions. Pas seulement des coalitions au niveau national, mais des coalitions au niveau régional, des coalitions au niveau international. Là, on a du poids et on a de la crédibilité, je pense. Voilà.
Excellent.
I just want to kind of address the issue of on the education, given that my field is education. I personally think that we haven't really done much around values and attitudes. I think the education field, as I mentioned earlier, focus very much on academic achievements. So yes, you might have brilliant engineers and brilliant others in the West, but they then join ISIS, so they join Al-Shabaab and others. And it also, I think the research shows that there's also that sense of belonging. So when we're looking at pluralistic values and attitudes, we also need to think about, do these young people feel that they belong to the community that they're in? I mean, for example, in the coast of Kenya, we did there was a research done by Aga Khan University where a lot of young people don't feel they even belong to their school. So there are lots of mental health issues that relates to that. And I think when we talk about values and attitudes, one of the things we quickly realize, I mean, in one of our Aga Khan academies, we've been integrating pluralism and ethics within the IB curriculum because we felt that it needed a special attention. But we had to really step back and say we do really need to first transform our teachers and educators. We really need to transform their own values and attitudes, their own biases. If teachers fundamentally believe that this kid doesn't deserve, or if there's no trust and relationship, and that's where it starts. So I think we really need to think through the values and attitudes and bring the values and attitudes at the same level as academic and other skills that we're looking at. And I think maybe then it will change. So I don't think we've done enough. So I would say we have to prioritize that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nafisa. Miriam?
Yes, on the trust gap, I think the message is very clear that the current structures in place simply do not stand up to the expectations of young people to shape policy outcomes. And that's also a call that the OECD got from its 36 member countries. And what we have seen in our member countries and also in the MENA region is a lot of strategies of youth engagement, etc. But the challenge or the bottleneck lies in the implementation, lies at the institutional level. I give you an example. For instance, if you are obliged to consult young people on climate change, is if the public officials are not capable of engaging with you because they don't have the skills, they don't have the resources, they don't know how to do it, then of course you will face many challenges. How many times have I heard from public officials telling me, Miriam, I'm tired of consultation. And of course, the other side of the fence is sometimes not better. I mean, it's not a question of pointing the finger, saying you are not doing this right, you need to do that and that. It is a matter of contributing meaningfully of what we call evidence-based policy making. So having the capacities also to contribute to policy proposals. And what we have seen in our member countries, but also in MENA countries, is how youth councils can have an important role in this regard as an institution to advocate for youth concerns in a very systematic manner. And another good practice example that I would like to highlight in this regard is the use of existing policy levers. An example, for instance, I hope that some of you had the opportunity to join the Open Government Partnership panel yesterday and this morning, is the existence of commitments on open government, on engagement with the society. Why not including youth commitments in these action plans? You will be surprised how few countries have thought about having this youth length in their open government action plans. In our member countries, we came across 7. In the MENA region, there is Tunisia, who has a youth commitment in its open government action plan, and soon Jordan will follow suit with the presentation of their action plan next week. And I'm very happy to see that the different hooks, the different policy levers are also used to foster youth engagement.
Thank you very much. Do we have time for another round? Maybe 2. Colombia.
My question is regarding how can we change the mindsets regarding young people, particularly when it comes to the participation in peace processes. We have seen that in the last 30 years, more than 900 peace processes have been agreed, and yet from all these agreements, youth participation there was not happening. So how can we move the needle forward and start to capitalize in the power of young people, mainly since we are the ones who are going to live what's going to happen after these peace agreements?
Colleague number 2, completely at the back, we have a hand. Yes, we have this one as well.
I'm from an organization which is the only one in Europe that represents European Muslim youth. It's the Forum of European Muslim Youth and Student Organizations. We have good relations with the European Commission, OSCE, and I actually had the chance to speak at the OSCE conference in Rome almost 3 weeks ago, on the panel of role of education in combating discrimination and negative stigmatization. I think when it comes to the discussions regarding youth and the role of youth in these civic participation, civic discussions, civic processes, it's really important to not forget the role of education when it comes to youth from minority backgrounds. We very often forget about youth from minority backgrounds, and obviously, since I'm coming from European Muslim Youth Organization, we focus on European Muslim youth. So my question would be, how would you kind of ensure that youth from minority backgrounds have both confidence in their own identity, in their own multicultural background, without feeling afraid of either wearing the headscarf, either having religious practices, be it from the religious background or ethnic background, feeling confident about their identity, but at the same time ensuring that their rights are protected by the state from not being violated in order for them to take most part in civic discussions and democratic processes. That's exactly what our organization tries to do.
Thank you. We'll come back to the lady on the third row.
My question is, we see civil societies are doing very well in promoting this kind of participation for the youth. But how civil societies can, better cooperate with the universities in different countries to help the youth to grow, to participate?
Thank you. Last one.
I'm on behalf of the National Defense Department in Honduras, and I would like to share with you that we are trying to get some policies about the youth. The government is working a lot with the youth right now. Actually, we have a program called the Guardians of the Nation that they are trying to get all these youth, children and youth, everybody, to have some rescue of the values and principles in there, working all together to have the better country for all the world.
Thank you. Any reaction from our distinguished panel? That will be the last minute each.
Well, very quickly to say that we're here talking about Resolution 2250. And I think we all have a role to play in pushing forward this kind of resolution and making sure that states understand that it's in their best interest to follow this through. It is a Jordanian initiative, but that doesn't mean that even Jordan will take it on board fully unless we also push. And I think civil society, I think organizations like the OECD, that can actually present the research. It's evidence-driven that we need everybody involved. And I think we have a big role to play in presenting that evidence because nobody can actually negate it. And therefore, it will start making sense the more we push for it. I think this is a long road. I'm not saying it's going to happen before our skill sets run out in 2020, but it certainly is something that we can do. And I've certainly worked all my life in either presenting opportunities for leadership, presenting opportunities for people to be included and also enabled, but I've also worked with outreach. So I think we can use research towards all those ends.
Shukran.
And just quickly, maybe on the education question, I don't have much expert in Europe, but I come from a minority ethnic group in my own country. I don't think it's about just the youth themselves, the minority. It has to be a multi-dimensional again. I think you need to look at, for example, in Portugal, we've been working with the Minister of Education, with the Minister of Immigration, and really looking at schools and how schools become intercultural, how schools become a space for not just the minority, but also the other children to understand who the minority kids are. So looking at a school policy, looking at a teacher professional development. So many of the teachers are not even aware of some of those minority groups. So it's taking them through that process and then looking at the young people themselves. So it can't be just on the identity of the youth and how the minority young people feel about themselves, but also how the others are feeling about themselves, about these minority. So again, I feel like it can't be just one-sided. You really have to think through an integrated approach to a whole school approach, I guess, when we talk about school and school systems. So hopefully address briefly that.
Thank you, Nafisa. Miriam?
I think one of the key messages for this panel is also that really institution matters, institutions that are capable of engaging with young people, but also youth that is capable of engaging with the public institutions. And then the second is, does it really matter? Does it really impact? Are the comments, are the feedback taken into account? Is the data actually generated to prove that we have made progress over time? And some of the results of this, and you were saying that that OECD is an evidence-based driven organization, is published here in our report on youth, how to bring them in. And I think the issue of data cannot be underlined enough, because if there is no data, then certainly there's no issue, and if there's no issue, there's no policy.
Kessy?
Oui, juste rapidement. Moi, mon message est beaucoup plus au fait tourné vers les organisations de jeunes qui sont présentes dans la salle, et ça rejoint la question que notre collègue colombien a posée par rapport à la participation au processus de paix. On s'est rendu compte, dans notre expérience au pays, c'est qu'on s'est rendu compte on a changé leur mentalité à partir du moment où, comme Miriam a souligné, on a commencé à proposer, on ne revendiquait pas seulement. On ne pointait pas du doigt seulement les problèmes, mais on venait avec des solutions concrètes. Et ça, c'est un travail, je pense, qui est important en termes de crédibilité. Parce que le vrai problème qu'on a en tant que jeunes, c'est qu'on nous trouve jeunes, c'est bien ça le problème. Et qu'on va arriver autour de la table et on va prendre beaucoup de selfies, on va prendre beaucoup de photos, dire qu'on est dans la salle, mais on ne participe pas, on ne propose rien de concret. Et je pense que c'est ça l'un des problèmes, prendre le temps d'analyser. Croyez-moi, quelquefois c'est très pénible. Mais prendre le temps de lire ces pavés de documents, mais qui auront un impact. Si tu maîtrises ce document, tu sais que tu auras les arguments pour tenir autour de cette table. Maintenant qu'on a toute la 2250 et toutes ces opportunités, on a accès aux tables un peu plus facilement. Mais même maîtriser maintenant ces documents, voir comment proposer des choses concrètes autour, tu sais que là, tu peux avoir un impact concret sur la vie, au fait, sur ta communauté dans une certaine mesure. Et même si les leaders ne s'en rendent pas compte sur le moment, mais au niveau de la communauté, surtout si tu fais un retour de ce qui a été dit là-bas, prendre la voix de tes pairs pour le monter aussi à un certain niveau, le retour permet aux jeunes au niveau local de se positionner aussi par rapport aux autorités. Je ne sais pas si ce que j'ai dit est très clair dans une certaine mesure, mais vraiment faire le retour aussi, parce qu'on a accès aux tables. Certes, si on revient sur cette question de crédibilité, on a la 2250, toutes ces opportunités, on a accès aux tables. Il nous faut maîtriser les documents, parler leur langage dans une certaine mesure, mais avoir aussi cette capacité et cette humilité de revenir à la base, renforcer les capacités de nos pairs pour pouvoir aller de l'avant tous ensemble. Parce qu'on ne peut pas faire cavalier seul, être seul leader. Et ça, je parle en tant que jeune leader, entre guillemets, j'aime pas ce mot. Je déteste ce mot. Mais en tant que jeune leader, dans un environnement où on a accès à ces forats-là, ne jamais oublier qu'on a été avec les autres dans le combat dès le début. Merci.
Bravo. Thank you so much. I think the discussion has been really rich. Thanks to the audience for the questions. I will not attempt to summarize, simply to say that I think we're clearly hearing that engaging in a tokenistic way with young people is never going to yield the results and the peace dividend that we hope to be able to get. If there is one long document, as Kessy was talking about, that you absolutely have to read, I would say that again, read the missing piece. It's calling for seismic shifts, really, when it comes to these new paradigms that we would like to see. I think you hear commitment as well from all sides to work together, to partner, to ensure that we're also self-reflective about our own practices, about our own ways of operating. Funding is an issue that we didn't respond to, but certainly sometimes we're lacking the tools to actually be able to do that, but we're all working on it. What is next when it comes to 2250? We're hoping to contribute to the establishment and the operationalization of a number of national coalitions, in-country coalitions on youth, peace and security, supporting national action plan, working, for instance, with Finland, who took the lead in announcing that they will develop a national action plan on 2250 at country level, being inspired by different models, as Kessy was talking about. The most important being that we support the youth agency and do not just extract and collect data from young people, but also really give back and give an opportunity for youth to directly be part of decision making. Thank you very much, and please visit the youthforpeace.info website, because you will see a number of resources, a number of tools, a number of best practices that we're committed to sharing together with the Global Coalition. And if you want to join this Global Coalition on youth, peace and security, certainly approach us, approach Kessy, who's also a member of the United Network of Young Peace Builders, who's a self-organized network working with young peace builders all around the world. Thank you very much to Miriam, to Kessy, to Haifa and Nafisa. It's been really interesting, and good luck with the closing and in your respective countries.